Everyone thinks that the Human Torch was the first person to do this trick. But no, this is the original.
Thank you.
Let's start the video. Hello everyone and welcome to another Rewind review, the 150th video on this channel by the way. And in this video we are taking a look at the first big screen adaptation for Marvel's first family, and that is Fantastic Four. Released in 2005 and based on the Marvel comic books, Fantastic Four sees a group of astronauts gain superpowers after a cosmic radiation exposure and must use them to oppose the plans of their enemy Dr. Victor Von Doom. Directed by Tim Story and written by Mark Frost and Michael France, the movie stars Ioan Gruffudd, Jessica Alba, Chris Evans, Michael Chiklis, Julian McMahon, Kerry Washington and Hamish Linklater. Now, I know that some of you are probably saying, hang on, this wasn't the first Fantastic Four movie, and you're absolutely right, but this was the first one to get an official release. Yeah, back in 1994, there was an unreleased Fantastic Four movie from Constantine Films and New Concord that, shall we say, doesn't have a great reputation, especially since the only reason it exists genuinely is because the executive producer wanted to keep the movie rights. Sounds familiar, doesn't it, Spidey fans? But there are copies of it available out there, that's why some people have been able to see it. But officially it was never released, which makes this movie the first actual officially released Fantastic Four movie. I saw this movie with my dad when it first came out on the big screen, and I remember really liking it. I even got all the tie-in Burger King toys as well, including that light-up Fantastic Four logo that you can clip onto your shirt. I'm not sure if I've still got it or not, to be honest, but it's been a while since I've actually sat down to watch this movie all the way through, and I have been quite keen to check it out again, especially since this movie seems to be getting a lot more love recently. And seeing as though this year marks the 20th anniversary of this movie and First Steps is released in cinemas, I decided to stick it on. I should also mention that I'm reviewing the theatrical cut of this movie, not the director's cut. It's not that much different, it's a little bit longer and it does have some sequences that I do like, and some sequences that really don't make sense. Mr. Fantastic shapeshifts into Wolverine at one point. I don't get why. The planetarium sequence would have fit so much better, or they could have just left it alone altogether. Anyway, so let's take a look at Fantastic Four. This iteration of Marvel's first family sees a group of 5 astronauts' lives change forever after their spacecraft is hit by a cloud of cosmic radiation, and they all develop strange abilities. And while 4 of them begin to use their powers for good, earning a celebrity status as the Fantastic Four, one, under pressure from his company, uses his powers for evil and selfish deeds as the power-hungry and manipulative Dr. Doom. So this is the origin story for the Fantastic Four. This is the movie where you see them getting their powers and learning how to use them. It does follow a lot of the beats that you do expect from a superhero origin story, but I wouldn't say this is anywhere near as straightforward as some of the other Marvel properties that were out at the time. It's a much smaller scale movie where a good chunk of the time is dedicated to them learning about themselves and having to adapt. It's a superhero movie where they don't really do that much superheroing. In fact, the majority of the movie takes place within the Baxter building where Reed lives. And that's not a bad thing, because that does feel like the Fantastic Four. They're researchers, they're scientists, they're explorers, and they're all thrust into the spotlight and have to learn to navigate their newfound fame, which works a lot better in a less crowded universe. But that's not to say that this movie doesn't have any action whatsoever. It does, it's very fun and very comic booky as well. There's only really 2 big set pieces, with the first one being the sequence on the bridge, and the second one being the final battle with Doom. Both of those sequences I honestly think are really good, well staged for the most part, and make good use of each of the characters' abilities. And there's some pretty decent stunts as well, especially during that bridge sequence. I love that shot of Ben just smashing into the front of the truck. That still looks impressive today. Fantastic Four may not have a lot of action, but it is still quite a lively movie and does keep a good pace, and still manages to do everything that it needs to do within an hour 40 runtime. But there is definitely some rushed moments, and I do think that there are some elements that could have done with a bit more time to breathe, especially some of the bigger character moments. And I've got to be honest, I don't think that even the extended cut really helps that much. That said, it is a very easy watch, and personally I do find it very entertaining. And one thing that I really did like about this movie is the depiction of a lot of the characters. Fantastic Four, like a lot of other Marvel properties that are out at the time, is a very character-driven movie. This doesn't have any end of the city, end of the world level stakes, it's all focused on the characters. Almost everything in this feels very personal. It's a very small movie when you really think about it. The Fantastic Four are Marvel's first family, and that's something that they really do emphasize in this. The family dynamic between the 4 main characters is a large focal point of this movie, and honestly, it's one of my favourite aspects. One of my favourite scenes is when they start living together and we get that montage of them just getting used to their new lives. Like Johnny pulling pranks on Ben or Reed stretching his face to shave. I could really do with being able to do that. I'm not even looking forward to how I'm going to do this. Anyway, that isn't something that you tend to see in superhero movies, and I really do like that aspect because it not only helps humanize the characters, it helps make them feel relatable. As a team, as a collective, I really like seeing how these characters work together and interact. How the movie splits them up into pairs so you get to see how each of them interact with each other. And I really appreciate how this movie is able to showcase how these characters are able to bring out the best in each other. You see the impact that they all have on each other. Sure, they squabble and clash, but that kind of comes with the territory. But they do work better when they are together. They complement each other and help balance out any flaws. They are a family. As I said, this is the strongest aspect of not only this movie, but the sequel as well. The chemistry between the cast and the dynamic between the characters is really good. Individually, I really do like who it is that they've cast as these characters and most of their portrayals as well. Starting off with Reed, Ioan Gruffudd plays Mr. Fantastic, and I really like how he plays him. He's a bit of a workaholic Mr. Sciencey guy who gets very wrapped up in his science projects. I do feel like they do push that aspect of Reed just a little too much at times, but at least it is portrayed as a flaw of his that does get addressed. In fact, he is the character that we see change the most over the course of the movie out of the main four. I'll talk about Ben a little bit later. He's the one you see that the others have had an effect on, and you see him evolve into a much more confident, take-charge leader who understands his team. There's a lot of history between Reed and some of the other characters in this movie, but it's either never addressed or it's just breezed over. But I do like this version of Reed. He's not an amazing character, but he is good, and I do think that Ioan does deliver a decent performance. And I've got to admit, his accent is pretty good too. It took me a long time to find out that he was Welsh. He's really good, and I do think that he has some really great scenes. Sue Storm, the mother of the team, the Invisible Woman, is played by Jessica Alba, and personally, I feel like Sue is one of the weaker characters. Not to say that she doesn't have her moments in this, she absolutely does. But they don't really do that much with her. It feels like she drew the short straw in terms of character development. She doesn't really change that much over the course of the movie, and we don't get to spend as much time with her as we do the others. But she is okay overall, and Jessica Alba's performance is not bad. Maybe if her character arc wasn't so focused on her getting back together with Reed and actually focused on the one issue that she admits that she does have, it might have been more investing. She mentions early on in the movie that she does have problems being seen and heard by people, and I don't think they really emphasise that enough. And I think if they had focused on that a little bit more, I think that it would have made her a lot more interesting. And in terms of her character arc, I think that it could have been something a lot better. Her relationship with Reed is a large focal point, but I do think that it is rushed as well, especially when they end up getting engaged by the end. Maybe if they focused more on that stuff than they did making a strip for absolutely no reason, it might have helped. Fun fact, that scene on the bridge was actually written into the script after Jessica Alba was cast. I'll admit, young me didn't mind that scene, but there really wasn't any reason for it. It's never made sense why they had it happen. It does feel quite unnecessary and gratuitous. Anyway, she is fine overall. I do think that Jessica does give a decent enough performance with what she's given. But yeah, as I said, unfortunately, out of the main four, she is the weaker character. Sue's brother Johnny, the Human Torch, is played by a pre-Captain America Chris Evans, and he's one of the most entertaining parts of this. He is an absolute scene stealer, and he was by far my favourite character in this as a kid. He's funny, he's immature and cocky, and out of the four of them, he's the one who's not only enamoured by the world of celebrity, he revels in it. Plus, he's got the coolest set of powers in this, if you pardon the pun. There is one thing that I have always questioned when it comes to this movie, and it's a sequence where the reporters are asking them questions after the bridge sequence. They get asked all these different questions like where their powers originate from and whether they're contagious. And then, one of the reporters asks Johnny whether it's true that he can fly. Why would that already be a rumour? Only he, Reed and Sue know that he might be able to fly, but they're not quite certain. So why would this reporter know? It's nitpicky, I know, but it's something that's always bugged me. Anyway, I feel he's the most two-dimensional character of the quartet. They don't really develop him that much. But, as I said, he is a load of fun. And yes, despite being older than the character should be, Chris Evans absolutely knocks it out the park and delivers a genuinely great performance. I really like this version of Johnny. And finally, rounding out the team is Ben Grimm, aka The Thing, played by Michael Chiklis. Ben, in many respects, is the heart of this movie. He feels the most central to the story, to the point where it does feel like he is the lead character, despite it being an ensemble. Out of the four of them, Ben is the only one that really struggles with his powers because he can't turn his rock form on and off. After the accident, he is stuck like that. His story is one that's about self-acceptance, and I think that everyone can relate to that in some way. And how it plays out is admittedly rushed, but it is one of the best character arcs in this. I feel like it skips over a lot of stuff to go from where Ben is at the start to where he is by the end. And admittedly, this is actually where the director's cut is actually helpful. But for this version of the film, I think they do a really good job of showcasing Ben's struggle, not just from how people see him, but how he can't quite adapt to his new life. Like the buttons on a phone booth being too small for him or struggling to pick up a ring. That's an absolutely absolutely heartbreaking scene. Plus, Debs is an absolute cow. She doesn't even hear him out or anything, she just dumps him. Wow. To be fair though, he does end up with Kerry Washington, so I really like this version of Ben Grimm, and Michael Chiklis is perfectly cast. In fact, he was the only cast member out of the 4 main leads that actually knew who the Fantastic Four were, and has openly admitted that the Thing was his favourite character. So I guarantee that he must have gone full fanboy on the day that he finally got to say, "It's clobbering time!" And this is a pitch perfect performance. Even the tone of voice that he's gone for with this character, which is, if you pardon the pun, quite gravelly compared to what the new version is. And that to me is what the Thing should sound like. Because, don't forget, all his organs are made of rock too. Even though I do think there are a few elements that do feel a little bit rushed in terms of characterisation, I absolutely love this version of the Thing overall, and I believe that Michael Chiklis actually pushed to have the Thing be a practical creation and not CGI, and I can't deny I think that was the right call. I know it's not the classic look for the Thing, but the practical suit does look pretty decent and allows Michael's performance to really shine through. And yeah, you can see the occasional crinkle in the makeup when he's flexing and turning and things like that, but who cares? It just adds to the charm. But when it comes to the actual CG effects that are used in this movie, they are quite dated. Not all of them, but some. They're not awful and don't look too out of place in my opinion, but no, some things really don't hold up, especially when it comes to Reed's stretchy powers. There is definitely a lot of creativity on display in this movie, especially when it comes to how they've adapted the character's powers, which I do think that for this time they did do their best at adapting these powers into live action. The way that the Invisible Woman always had this slight outline in the early comics whenever she turned invisible. In this movie they describe it as she's bending light around herself, so there's always this kind of shimmer on screen whenever she goes invisible. And visually, I do think that it looks kind of cool. Their powers and abilities are meant to be extensions of themselves, and I do think that is one aspect that they do get mostly right. Apart from Sue getting a nosebleed anytime she projects a force field. Why? Vanessa Kirby's Sue takes out Galactus on her own. Anyway, and for some reason they decided that Reed's grey hair should be part of his mutation, which makes no sense. Johnny's flame abilities hold up surprisingly quite well because they do mix a lot of real and CG elements. This was way more practical a movie than you may think. Also, it may be crowbarred into here, but I do appreciate that Johnny does say "flame on" anytime to activate his powers. And I must say, the team uniform, the costumes they wear, I do like. I've always had a preference towards the black and blue Fantastic Four uniforms. The only nitpick I have with the costumes is I think they should move the logo into the centre of the chest and have it be a little bit bigger, but I do like them overall. And now for Doom. Dr. Doom in this movie is played by Julian McMahon, and I am very conflicted with this interpretation. The comic fan in me is definitely disappointed in this version of Dr. Doom. I do think that he is severely toned down compared to his comic book counterpart. He doesn't do magic, he isn't the tyrannical ruler of Latveria, there's no Doom bots, and his cloak is a little bit more like a fashionable coat. But Julian's performance is excellent. He is suave and charming, the jealousy he feels towards Reed is there, he blames him for everything, which is spot on. His egotistical tendencies play a crucial role towards his change towards evil, and honestly, the mask and why he wears it is perfect. Sure, the boardroom stuff is a rip-off of the Green Goblin in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, and yeah, his turn into a full-blown killer who doesn't care how many people he hurts is way too fast. But I can't lie, for this continuity, I do think that this is a decent enough Doom adaptation that does work within context of this movie. His origin and backstory with Reed is definitely different, but it does work within context of this story. And they were still trying to keep these movies quite grounded and realistic, and I don't think that a comic book accurate Doom would really work in this kind of movie. So I can't really complain too much. For all intents and purposes, this is still so far the best version of Dr. Doom we've had in live action. Apart from the one from the Straight Outta Latveria YouTube channel. That version of Dr. Doom, I do think though, for an origin movie for the Fantastic Four, I probably would save Dr. Doom for a sequel, actually build up towards him and build up his threat. And I think for a debut movie, I'd probably go for somebody like the Mole Man. There's so many different villains that they could choose for Fantastic Four movies, and yet they all seem to always go for Doom, which I do understand though, because he is the most iconic villain in the Fantastic Four's Rogues Gallery. But there's so many different villains that they could choose from. The tie-in game that got released alongside the movie had loads of them, and I quite enjoyed that game as well. Anyway, there's a great cast involved in this movie, and I do think that generally overall the performances are pretty good. Even Stan Lee gets a little cameo in this.
Welcome back to the Baxter, Dr. Richards. I've got the usual for you. Good to have you back, sir. Thanks, Billy.
That scene really made me smile. Also, any of you watched a TV show called Legion will definitely recognise Doom's assistant. I've heard quite recently that when they first started developing this movie, they initially wanted it to be a comedy, and that's why Tim Story was brought on board. Because up until that point, he was mostly known for doing comedies. But because The Incredibles had released in the year prior and actually featured a lot of very similar jokes that they were going to feature in that initial version of Fantastic Four, they rewrote it. And apparently when Tim Story was brought on board, he actually pitched it to be a lot more closer to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man Spider-Man movies. He wanted there to be comedy, but he also wanted to have drama and heart, and I 100% agree that was the right choice. This is definitely a lot lighter, camper, and family-friendly than most of the other Marvel films that are out at the time. In fact, this is actually one of the rare PG-rated films, but the extended cut is rated at 12. It does feature a lot of comedy and humour, and to be honest, it is quite funny, but it does still have some darker moments and actual drama. Not a huge amount, but it does have its moments. To be honest, in my opinion, this feels like one of the most comic booky Marvel adaptations to come from the early 2000s. It really feels like this movie embraces a lot more of the out there, more comic book elements that you wouldn't really find in a lot of the other films. And that goes double for the sequel, but as I said, it does still try to be quite grounded, so it is a little bit mixed. It won't be for everyone, but as I said earlier, it is still an enjoyable film. And I would actually go so far as to say that I feel like this movie would actually be quite at home within the MCU, but feel free to disagree. Anyway, and lastly, John Ottman's soundtrack for this movie. I really like. It retains that superhero feel that John Ottman created for the X-Men movie soundtracks with a really memorable theme, and it's all mixed together with influences of sci-fi and mystery. It's really suitable, and I genuinely like it. In fact, the main theme to me is still the theme of the Fantastic Four. As amazing as the Michael Giacchino soundtrack is for First Steps, this is still a memorable and really good soundtrack. And just like a lot of the other Marvel adaptations that were out in the early 2000s, this features a selection of songs from some very big artists at the time. It's mostly rock punk type stuff, and I love it. This features Sum 41, Megan McCauley, Ben Moody, and Anastasia. Error Operator from Taking Back Sunday is a song that I will always associate with the Fantastic Four. It even features in the game. And Come On Come In from Velvet Revolver is one of my all-time favourite songs. Anytime it appears on my playlist, I have to listen to it. It is so good. The soundtrack really helps liven this movie up, and I do think that the song choices are really good. What they've chosen, how they used, I do think that it is decent. And the main soundtrack from John Ottman is really good too. Overall, this may not be an amazing movie by any means, but it is fun and very enjoyable. The cast is great, the performances and chemistry is pretty good, the story is small scale and character focused, it feels a bit different, lighter and funnier than what you tended to see in the early 2000s, and the soundtrack, stunts and some of the visual effects are decent too. But yes, there is a lot of elements that don't quite work or hold up as well as they could. Some elements like the plot and character development feel either rushed or skimmed over. Some other visual effects really don't hold up very well, and there isn't really that much tension or drama, with the story not allowing for much superheroing. But in spite of that, this is still a very enjoyable movie. Far more enjoyable than other reviews often make it out to be. I wouldn't say that it was a must watch, but I think that you should at least check it out, especially if you want to understand the Chris Evans cameo in Deadpool and Wolverine. It's a fun family superhero action movie that did a fairly decent job of adapting Marvel's First Family. I enjoyed it as a kid and I still enjoy it now. It's not fantastic, but in my opinion, it is good. So with all that being said, my rating for Fantastic Four is a 6 out of 10. I still to this day cannot understand why this movie has such a bad reputation. It's nowhere near the quality that people think it is. You want a bad movie? Watch Fan 4 Stick. I love how that name stuck. Anyway, I think I'll leave things there for this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy this content, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. If you have seen Fantastic Four, let me know down in the comments what you think about it and which movie in the franchise is your favourite. Plus, if you have any suggestions for any future Rewind reviews or recommendations you would like to see me do in the future, let me know down below. But until next time, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. See you guys.